Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Thielman, and I'm the chairperson of the Arlington High School Building Committee. I want to take a few moments to give you an overview of where we are with our project, and I want to welcome all of you to tonight's forum. You're going to have an opportunity in a little bit to give us some feedback on some of our design options. I think it's important to take a step back and get a sense of where we've been with our project. This is our 5th public forum. Our first forum was in January, and that was a chance to solicit ideas from the public on what people liked and disliked about Arlington High School and about what they saw as major opportunities for renovating or rebuilding it. The second forum was in February, and that was an opportunity for our principal, Dr. Matthew Janger, to present the school's current and future programming, and then for the public to engage in a conversation about the educational plan for Arlington High School. The third forum in March was a tour of the current high school and a further conversation about the educational vision. The fourth forum, the April forum, focused on 8 different options for the new school, and the community had a chance to give input on those 8 options. We're down to 4, so we're getting closer. Beginning in January, an educational visioning committee of 60 teachers, administrators, school committee members, parents, and other community members worked with Dr. Janger, Superintendent Bodie, and an educational consultant from New Vista Design, David Stephen, to develop an educational visioning report that is a critical piece of our decision-making. Our committee has been working together since last June. We had our first meeting in, I don't know when it was, last June, I think it was June of 2017. So our committee's been working together for quite some time, and I'd like every member of the building committee to stand up and just shout out your name real fast. We'll start over here. Ryan, good to see you. Who are we missing? We're the students. We have 2 students. Oh, Matthew Janger, Adam Chapdelaine, and we're the students. So we have 2. Didn't they come tonight? Okay. And Kate Lucian is here. Am I missing anyone else? Okay, that's the committee. So we'll be in and around the room tonight, and you can approach us at any point in the evening and ask us questions about the project. There are several different subcommittees that do a lot of work, a subcommittee on sustainability, finances, and communications, and I want to take a second to recognize our communications subcommittee members, Amy Spear and Kirstie Allison Ampe, who have put together all of these forums and are responsible for our website, which we hope you visit to learn more about our project. As a committee, we are working very hard to listen to each and every perspective in the town on this project, and we're taking every perspective we hear into account as we make a determination about which design we'll select and present to the MSBA. As a recap, we are engaged in this process because while Arlington High School is a top-ranked educational institution, the current building cannot accommodate anticipated enrollment. 30% of the classrooms in the facility, including the science labs, are inadequate. Much of the infrastructure has a critical need for modernization, and the school received a warning from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges because of facility issues during the 2013 reaccreditation visit. If we don't address these facility issues by 2023, the next NEASC visit, we could jeopardize our accreditation. Given the NEASC report and the condition of the building, we face 2 choices. We either rebuild Arlington High School with state money, which costs Arlington taxpayers less money, or without state funds, which would cost the taxpayers more money. Our project is about working with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, with the Massachusetts School Building Authority on this project. The MSBA invited the town into the school building grant program in January of 2016. And in June of 2016, to recap, Arlington's voters overwhelmingly approved a $2 million of funding to finance the feasibility study, the stage of work we are now in. I want to take a moment to talk about how MSBA funding works. 1 penny of the state's 6.25% sales tax goes to fund eligible school projects throughout Massachusetts. So there's a potential ballot question to reduce the sales tax. If the sales tax is reduced, the amount of pennies available for school projects will be reduced as well. The MSBA determines the rate of reimbursement for each project, and the MSBA has restrictions on what we can build. Specifically, the MSBA will not participate in projects that include a pool or a field house, so we're not talking about those two needs that some people have expressed here in town. And the MSBA process outlines the steps the school and the district and construction professionals must take to complete the project. So let me go back. So there is an eligibility period, a period in which we form the project team. There's a feasibility study, schematic design, the funding of the project, a detailed ed design, construction, and then the completion of the project. So for the Arlington project, for our project, our period of eligibility was between 2015 and 2017. In 2017, we formed the project team. The feasibility study is underway right now. We hope to finish, we will finish by August of 2018. The next stage, Module 4, is known as schematic design. The town takes a vote in June of 2019. A project funding agreement is hopefully signed in the summer of 2019. Detailed design and bidding, where we're planning the actual staging of the project, takes place during the 2019-2020 school year. And then construction begins sometime, we hope, sometime in 2020, with a closeout sometime between 2024 and 2025. Don't hold on to those dates yet. We haven't got that far, but that's kind of the basic outline of the project. During the feasibility study stage, the stage that we're at now, we were tasked with looking at 3 different options: renovating the school, building a new school, or doing a renovation addition. The design team, HMFH, Lori Coles and her staff, concluded that it would be too costly to renovate the current school, which means we have a choice between building a new school or building a new school with a renovation of some of the existing facilities. I want to talk a little bit about costs. So our committee is working very hard to meet the town's desire to create a building that will last 50 to 100 years, and we're also mindful of the need to be conscious of how much this costs. The original buildings in our current high school were built in 1914 and 1938. They were financed and designed by people who had no idea what the world would look like in 2018. And today we're in the same shoes as the people who lived here 100 years ago. We're trying to build something that will serve generations of young people who have yet to be born. At this time, the cost estimates for the 4 options we are going to discuss this evening are between $287 and $298 million. And the numbers are based on square footage and soft cost estimates. So this is the current estimate, and these are very, very preliminary numbers. We have a lot of work to do to get tighter numbers. It's helpful to take a moment to compare our project to 3 other projects that are taking place in our region at this time. Arlington High School's design enrollment is for 1,755 students. Somerville High School, whose project was approved in November of 2016 for 1,590 students, has a total project cost today of about $250 million, and the escalated project cost, if it were on our timetable, is $270 million. Waltham High School, with a design enrollment of 1,830 students, has a total project cost of $300 million, and if it were on our timeline, it would cost about $312 million. Belmont High School, which is a middle school and a high school, 2,215 students, $295 million. total project cost that was approved by the state, and a total escalated project cost on that timeline of $301 million. So we are following, or we are similar to some of the other projects that are taking place across the state and across our region. And it's important to recognize that these projects and these numbers are a result of a lot of work in their post-feasibility study stage. They're a result of the schematic design stage. There have been a lot of questions that have been raised by members of the community about what is going to happen while the construction is taking place. These kind of projects take place all across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and they take place in footprints that are as tight as ours. And so there's a lot of experience in continuing education while construction takes place. So we can assure you of a few things. First of all, our architects and our design team are going to be focused on the safety of everyone in and around the building. Construction logistics and scheduling will be reviewed by the police department, the fire department, the superintendent's office, and the school district. MCAS, exams, and other activities will be built into the schedule as quiet days. So there will be some days of construction, or some days where construction can't take place, or construction can only take place inside the facility. There will be CORI, criminal background checks on all construction workers that are in the site. And any workers that will be on the site must be approved by the owner's project manager and by the superintendent's office, by the school department. Building tours and handouts prior to the start of each school year will be made available so that everyone can familiarize themselves with the school and with the safe routes that need to be taken to navigate the school. And the town is represented in all construction meetings throughout the project. So, for those of you kind of planning through the next several years, education will continue, and if you're a student listening, you will still be going to class, you will still be getting an education, and we'll still continue to have very high standards here in Arlington with great results all throughout the high school. So, the question before the building committee at this time, and this is why we're here at this forum, is how do we decide which of the four options we should recommend to the state of Massachusetts, to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, as our preferred option? There are 5 different criteria that I want to walk through and that we're going to ask your feedback on later in the meeting. Educational criteria, community, building, site, and cost. So the educational criteria is probably the most important for everyone on our committee, and the first question is does the plan for the building support the educational program? Does it support the social and emotional health of our young people? Does it achieve ideal adjacencies in terms of the location of departments? Does it improve interior circulation within the building? And does it include green space and outdoor learning? So for most of us on the committee, this is our top priority. What's going to work educationally? What's going to make this a great space so that students can learn and grow and be all that they're meant to be? The second criteria is the community. We want easy access to community program spaces, and it's important for us as a town that the school be a community hub. There's only really 2 auditoriums in this town at this time, this one and the one at the high school, and we're aware of how important both places are for community gatherings and meetings. Building. Building security, internal and external, is obviously incredibly important. Controlled access for community uses. We want to make sure the building maximizes sustainability. We want to make sure, we want to hear from you, and we've had so far, we want to continue hearing from you, that the design fits well into Arlington, the Arlington as you see it. And there has been a lot of talk about retaining historic components, and we want to factor in community input on that part of our decision. The site, we want to make sure the site has flexibility for future expansion. We want to make sure that it adequately improves parking on the site. There needs to be an improvement in access to public transportation and the bike path, and improves exterior site use and circulation. And then finally, cost, not insignificant. We obviously have to take into account the cost of the project, and we want to make sure that we optimize construction timing and phasing. The the faster we can do the project, the less expensive it will be, but at the same time, we have to take into account all of the other factors that are part of this project. So tonight, Lori Coles, our architect, I'm going to call her up in a second, is going to give us an overview of where we are in the project. She's going to talk about the 4 options. Then at the conclusion of her remarks, we're going to have a Q&A, and then we're going to pass out feedback forms and ask people to give us feedback on the project. There's members of the building committee around the room. There's designs around the room as well. And we look forward to your input, and we appreciate your time tonight. Laurie?
We do still have a few seats left if people want to come up and find them. People can point out where there's available seats. I'm told I have almost an hour, so you might want to sit. It's great seeing you all. We appreciate the turnout and the interest and also the feedback that you're going to give us. As Jeff noted, we started off with about 11 options, and we're down to 4, which still seems like a lot. And we've got about a month and a half to get down to 1. And I know from all of our time with the building committee, they're very interested in hearing what you all have to say to be part of that input as they're deciding what direction to take. Thank you for squeezing in there. So one of the main things, as Jeff said, is about the education, and that's why we're doing this. And so we just wanted to hit some highlights about what it is that we're planning for in this building. And for some of you, I'm making a note here about how it compares to the existing building. I'm betting that all of you have spent time in the existing building, so you won't be surprised. But it's just to give you some highlights about square footage and just the different types of educational spaces that we're planning for. So currently the high school has 47 classrooms. We're planning for 60. Also, I'll point out that currently high school has around 1,300 kids, and we're planning for 1,755. So we do need more space. Science labs increase both in quantity and size and having all the amenities that a science lab needs to have. We have a number of special education programs, and we're not looking to change them so much as serve them well and have them in appropriate size spaces and adjacencies for those spaces. The gymnasium will be larger than the current main gymnasium, and it will feature jogging or walking lanes at the floor level of the gymnasium both for PE and for athletics and for the community. The auditorium, interestingly enough, I know this may be hard to believe, but the current auditorium does seat 900 people, but it's greatly undersized. And it's undersized in ways that to meet current codes for accessibility, accessible seats, width of aisles, all of that. So ultimately we are designing for a 900-seat auditorium, but it will be a larger space, physical space. Again, larger spaces to accommodate band, chorus, drama. The art classrooms will be the appropriate size. And we're looking at a number of specialty spaces. Some of these do exist in the school already as program spaces, but again, greatly undersized, underserved in terms of plumbing and technology and all the things that you'd want in those spaces. So we have things called maker spaces these days, and one does exist at the school, but we're proposing 2. It's very popular. And a lot of specialized lab for STEM and for CAD and for digital arts, digital media, and so on. So you can ask me any questions about these various spaces, and we also have the school principal here that can elaborate. And a larger library space and a larger cafeteria, both of which will be much needed when you have a larger population. So I wanted to try to encapsulate some commonalities between the alternatives we're going to look at, just so I don't have to repeat the same thing over and over. So we are looking at 4 alternatives. 2 of them are renovation addition. 2 of them are all new. And within that, they're generally overall the same overall size. And what I mean by that in general, why it's not exact, is in the renovations portion, the sizes and spaces are a little different than what you might program if it was all new. So there'll be a little bit of difference in size, but generally similar. And they all are designed to have all of the educational program spaces that we're planning for. So that's a sort of an equal issue across the board. They are also all going to be designed for 250 parking spaces. And they are all looking at developing an access route from Minuteman Bike Path to the high school. And then in conjunction with this, once we sort of upgrade the school building, we sort of have to have some upgrade to the facilities on the site as well to meet code requirements. And one of those is the quantities of toilet facilities on the site. So we'll be designing for a new toilet facility outside the building in relationship to the sports fields. And I think Jeff already hit upon this roughly. I mean, we all know these are very large numbers we're talking about, so when there's a swing of $10 or $15 million in some worlds, that is a very lot of money, but in an overall scheme of the project, it's all pretty similar right now. So the first alternative is one of the renovation addition alternatives. And if you've come to earlier forums, we've talked a lot about the existing building and sort of what was good to keep and what we decided really as either because of its location, because of what it accommodated, because of the construction type, all of that, what we were going to not keep. And so we've decided we're keeping Fusco, which is your oldest school building, which is to the left when you face the building from Mass Ave. And Column House, which is really just, in reality, we're really talking about that central portion that's under the pitched roof. And so otherwise, in this alternative, we're talking about building to the back of that. And so the front will look different, but those two sort of front facades that you're used to seeing would still be there. And we would also have the entire of the front green available to us. We've sort of talked to a lot of different people about this, and the front green is really important, but they also concede that it's relatively unutilized right now, low utilization. And so in any of these configurations, in most of these configurations, we're really talking about reprogramming the front green for better use. So the site, and I know this is a little bit light, so hopefully you can see it, and I will use my pointer. So along the bottom here is Mass Ave. We're noting the two MBTA locations. Along the top of the plan is the Minuteman Bike Path, and we're noting sort of creating an access path. And so the roadway that goes around the school building in all options would be improved. It would be two-way. It would be safe. You'd be able to see somebody coming around the corner, which doesn't happen now. All of those things will just be improved. And so we're looking at something that sort of really has wings out the back, and you'll see it more closely in the floor plans, but it's designed to sort of have a central spine that everything comes off of. So either an academic wing comes off of it, or the cafeteria comes off of it, and so on, as just an organizing tool of this very large building. And did I mention that it's going to be around 400,000 square feet? So it is a very large building. In this instance, also the back portion of the building will be 6 floors. So we're looking at, again, putting parking in various spaces, and all of that would get more finely designed as time goes on. So the images you see on top are just sort of for massing and scale. They're not designs. It's not about material. We're not planning any of that at all right now. But just to give a sense of what the front might look like, you're seeing Fusco, you're seeing Column House and other buildings. And then from the back, this would be more or less from the Minuteman Bike Path. That's because that's where I took the picture from, and I used it as the perspective. And so you'd sort of see the 3 volumes of building, as well as the clock tower in the distance. The lower image is just a very simple, what we call a section. And it's basically cutting a line through the middle of the building and showing you what's in the building. And again, you're all very familiar with this. The building has one grade at the front and a different grade at the back. And so there's a drop between the front and the back. And so we want to accommodate that and program and plan for spaces that it's okay to be without windows. And so there'll be mechanical spaces, and some of the kitchens and other aspects would be happening at that drop space here. But otherwise, your lobby with the library above, cafeteria below, and then beyond that, in one of the central wings at the back is the gymnasium. So again, you'll see closer in the floor plans. And this is also showing the idea that possibly of opening up or seeing a portion of what's happening underneath that pitched roof. So we just made some notes just to try to focus our attention on some of the things that are happening here. So we are talking about historic reuse. One of the components about this, when you retain Fusco, there's two spaces in Fusco that aren't necessarily part of the program going forward in an all-new building, but they are heavily used now, and one's called Old Hall, and the other one's called The Pit. And I know that doesn't sound appealing, but it's very popular. So those two spaces would be retained. This is, as we talked about, the front green could be reprogrammed, better organized. Generally, it might be hard to see, but you're seeing the roof of the red gym here and the roof of Downs. So there would be less building in the back of the site. So more space that can be developed for plazas or parking or, you know, the circulation drive and other things. So you have sort of what I think of as plazas or open-ended courtyards happening at the back here. So this is the first floor level, and this is the first floor level if you're at the back of the site, not the front of the site. And in here, we have the central cafeteria and the auditorium. And coupled with that is the lower level below the gymnasium, which is going to hold all the locker rooms and some of the other alt PE spaces. They call them alt PE, alternative PE spaces, so maybe the fitness center, things like that. To the left is the preschool. So we currently have a preschool, and we will continue to have a preschool at this site. And to the right is sort of the maker spaces and suites. So it's going to have the art classrooms and the maker spaces and the CAD lab and various creative spaces. Also connected to this is the what we refer to as the back of the house of the auditorium, which is going to have your band and your chorus and what they call the digital media studio and a lot of technology to be able to support what's happening on the stage. So a few other things. So in this option, and actually in all options to some degree, we will need to have swing space. And so swing space is basically referring to where do people go when they can't be on the site during construction. And so at minimum in all of these options, it is a goal of the building committee to temporarily relocate the preschool and daycare off-site. Frankly, no contractor really wants to work on a site with small children on if they don't have to. But that's one of the goals, and again, something we would do in all alternatives. So one of the other pieces, and you'll see it upstairs as well, you have the cafeteria, the auditorium, and the gymnasium. Everything that's really what I refer to as the shared use spaces or the community use spaces are sort of centrally located. And what this allows us to do is lock off the classroom wings after hours if they're not needed. It makes it easy for the public to get to either from the back side of the site or you'll see in a moment from the front side of the site. And I think most of these other things we've talked about, you'll see a little bit more about how the plan's laid out. And we do have a variety of outdoor education-related spaces planned for here. So some of these might be at the roof level, some are at courtyard levels, some are out the back in plazas. So it's different venues for the educators to go out with their class. Some may be designed like an amphitheater, some might be designed like just a straight outdoor gathering space, and so on. So there's a lot of, once you tell somebody they have a little bit of land outdoors to do things, there's a lot of excitement of what they would do in those spaces. So the upper two floors, we have, this would be along the front green, and you would enter, as you do now, in a way that you would be greeted by the school administration. And at that same level is the main gymnasium and the upper part of the auditorium. So you could also get into the auditorium from the main entrance here. And a lot of these program spaces over here are the special ed programs. And on the right-hand side, currently, we are accommodating the district administrative offices. When you get up to the upper levels, the wings on both sides, one is strictly speaking the humanities classroom spaces and their specialty program spaces, and the other side is what we're calling the STEAM classroom spaces, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And so bringing those classrooms closer together, they can collaborate more and just ease of using the different unique spaces, all those lab spaces we were talking about. And so that's the idea behind the wings of this. And then when you get to the upper floors, again, it's very similar. We've got humanities and STEAM humanities and STEAM. And then this is, again, 6 floors at the back, and that's the top floor there, where you see that central spine and the last of the humanities and STEAM classrooms. So we talked a little bit about generally time frame. There's maybe a year or 2 or so in between each of these schemes. And these have been done by us with assistance from the owner's project manager, but without assistance of a contractor. So when a contractor comes on board, they look for ways to make things as fast as possible, of course. But what I think, similar to what we say about the cost that we're putting out there, it's similar about this. They're all done with the same thinking behind them. So they're all comparative to each other. So they might be off by a couple months one way or another, or a couple $1 million one way or another, but in relationship to each other, they're able, you can see high, low, longer, shorter. So that's really the goal at this stage, this early stage of the process, is just to give a sense of what it would take. So we're showing here 4 phases. This is the first phase, generally speaking, starting from the right and moving over. The second phase is in the middle. The third phase is here, and the fourth phase is here. We're indicating on here a number of areas on the site that would be used for either swing space, contractor laydown space, parking, because we've taken away parking from somewhere else, various areas around the building that during the different phases, they'll be used in different ways to accommodate what's needed for both the school and for the contractor. So along the bottom, you're seeing bars of time for each phase. The gray portion of it is related to some level of demolition that would need to happen first, and then the yellow would be the new construction that would happen, or the renovation that would happen. And so that's showing each of the phases here. So we're trying to make a note here of, as soon as, what's the earliest that they're going to have some new stuff, new spaces that are appropriately sized and so on. And so in the case of this one, phase 1, once it's complete, will be the whole wing. So you'll have all the sciences, the maker spaces, most of the labs. You'll have the auditorium space, the back of the house of the auditorium for the chorus and band and so on. All of that would be complete for February 2022. Say that 3 times. So, and then the final occupancy, again, this is sort of the outlier of being the longest one, is January 2026. Now, one of the really simple reasons of why this is longer than the others is because, in fact, we are building right in the existing footprint. So it just takes more steps and more time to do those steps incrementally. Again, a goal would be the more students and/or other programs we can relocate ahead of time, whether on this site or in other locations, the faster this can go. So this is just based on our current knowledge and information available at this time. So 2 is also retaining Fesco and Column House, just a little different. They're sort of, in this case, it's being tucked in between new construction. And in this case, because you'll see, we're going to want to make corridor and connections between the 2 classroom wings. It might be behind glass. It might be something you experience at the lobby or you experience at the library when you're upstairs. So that's all part of design thinking as we go forward. And so the idea behind this is that we are building in part on the front green. And one of the real pluses of this is that we are instantly building swing space. We're building our own swing space. So basically, until these 2 wings are ready, the high school sort of continues as it normally would as far as where classrooms are and how kids move around the building. It will be after that that we relocate. Basically, in this case, all of the humanities classrooms and all of the STEAM classrooms. So that's your sciences and so on. We're showing sort of, I keep forgetting to change this because it was a question. The community can come in the front door. I know I put the word community on the back, but we're trying to say, in a typical school day, students will probably come in wherever the main admin is, from the main office. But after hours, when the public is coming and there's parking in the back or there's coming by MBTA in the front or whatever the case may be, welcoming entries would be happening on both sides of the building. I think that's become a very, very important goal of the project as opposed to what happens now, which the back of the building is not very pleasant. You know you're at the back of the building. So the site diagram, again, with a goal of being able to loop around the back very easily, to have drop-off, to have circulation, to be able to, not worry about, all the congestion that happens on site now. If anyone's been there in the springtime on a Saturday, it's pretty hectic on site. So it's looking at, in this case, the preschool is actually at the front, so there would be a drop-off zone happening for the preschool, separate from everything else. Again, these two wings, we'll look closely at them, and the parking to accommodate the 250 spaces. Again, just some diagrams showing the front of the building with two wings. The back of the building essentially also has two wings as well, on either side, and a central sort of plaza space, which actually is right outside of where the cafeteria is and where high schoolers can spill out for lunch. And then you're seeing the Mass Ave view here. This would be the wing in the distance, but cutting through that central portion that we keep talking about, and the section through that with the cafeteria, the lobby, and the library above that. And the idea of retaining underneath the pitched roof and the clock tower in the design. So the lowest level floor plan, you're sort of seeing these funny little boxes because they're actually above you, right? In the next drawing, you'll see the actual plan of that. But this is the line of the soil where it drops, and you have the central cafeteria, the auditorium at the lowest level, the district offices are off to the left. Additional PE, gym classes and support spaces are happening here. And again, I'll show you, this line here that's part of this open space, that's all the north courtyard. So this space and all of this back here gets to be reclaimed and programmed for, again, that site circulation and outdoor activities. So we are retaining historic reuse, retaining Old Hall in the pit. This diagram, this option is 5 floors. We still have the front green, just a smaller portion of it, and it can be reprogrammed as needed. We have the increased space to the rear. We build the swing space to start. Centrally located community spaces, separate wings for STEAM and humanities, and then the multiple outdoor spaces between the front portion, an interior courtyard, the rear plaza, as well as you'll see a green roof. The upper floor showing coming in at the main entry. At this level, you are again at the gymnasium level and the upper auditorium level. The STEAM wing, this is preschool here, then starts on that next floor, humanities and STEAM on either side. And again, a number of the special ed programs that are supporting the education throughout. And at the central core of the building in all diagrams is the library/learning commons. Floors 4 and 5 continue this up with, again, the wings continuing to hold all of the spaces that we need. And in this case, the green roof is just outside the sciences. So for phasing of this one, it is a little shorter than the first one. It has a first phase, which we talked about, building out front, a second phase, which is a lot of these core spaces, and then a third phase to finish building spaces. And so again, we're noting initial occupancy. So in this case, you will have all of your core academic spaces, including the sciences and the maker spaces and the art classrooms, by January 2022. The third alternative is essentially all new. I do use the word essential. It's very common in a lot of our projects when we're taking down a historic building or a building that has features that are of interest to try to reuse and incorporate those inside the building. So you won't see them like you see them now, But again, that's an opportunity for us to retain that historic value. It may be that we reuse the columns inside the building and so on. So that's been talked a lot about with the building committee. So we again have the front green, we again are building on the front green, and we are again creating the two wings for education. We again are providing sort of a main entrance to the front side and a secondary main entrance to the back side, and a separate entrance for the preschool for its coming and goings. The perspectives are showing you the front with the two wings, and the back, you're sort of seeing the back curve of the auditorium, just so happens, as well as the wing to the right of that, with open space between. And this is showing you the similar idea of entering at one level and having an exit at the lower level. The site plan, again, with the concept, the more you build up front, the more space you have in the back to develop. And so similarly, we are managing to keep all the fields and reorganizing some of them, and also getting 250 parking spaces. We have a couple different, I sometimes refer to them as open courtyards or plazas. So this one in particular is in relationship to the maker spaces and the art classrooms, and they've talked a lot about what they would do if they had access to an outdoor courtyard. And then the other side here is maybe more related to the humanities and the performing arts, and it might be an outdoor amphitheater. We have, again, the separate drop-off for preschool to one side. That lowest level plan looks like this. It has a central cafeteria, central auditorium, the back of the house for the performing arts. To the left is some of the PE and one of the special education programs. And to the right is the preschool. And again, I think this gives a clear picture, if you spend time on the back of the site, how much more of the site you gain back. 5 stories, and I think a lot of these things I've mentioned, and I don't want to overly repeat myself, but again, the importance of building out front to create swing space, and the variety of outdoor learning opportunities that we have here. The second floor, again, this would be along the entry at Mass Ave to the administration wing, and through that to the gymnasium, and again, the upper auditorium, and also access to either a green roof or amphitheater, however it might get programmed, and access the other side to another outdoor learning space. STEAM wing on one side, humanity wing on the other. I should have mentioned, but both 2 and 3, these are 4-story wings in the front. So they more or less align in height to what Fusco is now. And then up a floor gets you to the centrally located library space and the STEAM humanities. So one of the things that I think becomes a little bit of a plus about this is how tight it is in terms of where the students need to spend their day. So this wing over here has the district office and the preschool, and so students aren't coming and going from there. So it's okay that it's to the side and out of the way, and instead lets the central core pieces be available for the students and teachers. And then the upper 2 floors are more of the classrooms and space. So you can see, generally what we're talking about in phase 1 is the construction of all of that to begin with. And the possibility, we're, again, just playing with its ideas, the possibility that at that front, which is south-facing, you'd have some opportunity for a green roof there as well. So the construction for this is maybe just, I think it's very similar to 2. 2 and 3 are very similar in time frame. With that initial occupancy of phase 1 in January 2022. And then we would be constructing phase 2 and then phase 3. And our fourth option is all new construction. It is constructed entirely in front of the existing school. It's 6 stories tall, and I have been asked more than once, well, can't it be smaller? but I did mention it's 400,000 square feet of program. So this is the size footprint we have, so therefore it's as many floors as we have. I think the other thing that everyone needs to be cognizant of is that the majority of our spaces need windows. You can't have classrooms without windows. So we need those floors and the perimeter around to be able to have windows and fresh air for the classrooms. So we are still aiming to have a humanities side and a STEAM side. The other thing that you'll see as we look at the floor plans is how we're accomplishing this is that we are taking the two large volume spaces, your gymnasium and your auditorium, and tucking them in the middle and surrounding them with the classrooms that need windows. And so that's how this works. And I don't know how to make it smaller. So one of the things that I think is a challenge on this one is, generally speaking, I don't know how to say this without saying it, we're on the sidewalk. And again, it's just a square footage, acreage, math problem. So it's nothing that we can do in terms of that, short of going higher. And so I struggle a little bit with its welcoming factor if in fact you're popping into the school right off the sidewalk. It doesn't quite have the approach that I think a civic building likes to have. So we are trying to identify having a preschool entry on one side, a district entry on the other, some of these other elements. And the other piece you'll see, if you can imagine, we're building right on that line where the grade drops behind. So when we take down the existing school, after this is up and ready, we've got a drop. And so you could argue that you could just leave it like that, but really, in truth, a public building needs to have accessible parking and an accessible way to get into the building. So what you're going to see is we're proposing that we actually bring up a portion of that grade so it aligns with the first floor and just say aligns with Mass Ave, so that we have an accessible approach to the building. So what you're seeing in that vein is the potential that this first tier of parking and drop-off, and also your receiving, all of these things would have to happen sort of in the same spot, would be here, and then maybe you would terrace down to the lower level where you'd have more parking. Again, we're showing this at 250 spaces, just like all the others. We're showing the potential for some level of play for the preschool to the side. We are still, providing a much more pleasant loop road and access road to it, and the other aspects of the site and field are similar. But basically, you just have more, because you've eliminated what's in front, you have more space in the back to develop. Let's go to the next. So we've done just some quick diagrams here of along Mass Ave. And this is coming from the Minuteman bike path and looking at the back side of the building. And, scale is a hard thing to judge, but with it up the 20 feet or so from the back. And you're seeing it here. Again, we were trying to express the fact that to create the accessibility that we need around the building, we would come in here and fill and then drop down to the back fields. And we're cutting through the middle like we are in all the other ones, and the middle of this would also have the cafeteria at the main entry when you first come in, and the library above that, and again, gymnasium to one side, auditorium to the other side. So you'll see that in these floor plans. So this lowest level floor plan here, we have the preschool, which is wrapping around the athletic support space, the locker rooms, and the alt PE spaces, central cafeteria. And on the right side at the lowest level, or first floor level, is the kitchen and sort of back of the house. And we're wrapping that with the district administration. So there's a potential, the sort of again, a two-sided main entry, both bringing you into this central zone here of the cafeteria. It is 6 stories. While we don't need a lot of swing space, again, like I said, at varying degrees, I think we probably would still be recommending that preschool and daycare are relocated even during this construction. Because you have to imagine that the contractor has to go somewhere. So he has to build this large building, so he's still going to need laydown space. We've still taken away parking space in the front, so a lot of the things we talked about still need to happen during this construction phase as well. We have the 2 wings on either side, which I'll show you in the next one. You can start to see going around the gymnasium, going around the auditorium. In this case, on this floor, it's all the performing arts spaces. On the other floor are many of the special ed programs. Then up the next floor, we actually, because the band, chorus, drama spaces need double height spaces, you're seeing a lot of sort of X's for open spaces. And so it sort of became, what else do we put on that side of the building? So in this case here, we are accommodating the town IT. That's still in debate of where it's going to be, but right now we are showing it here. And then the left side is the start of the STEAM, so the maker spaces and some of the art classrooms are happening there. And then as we go up, it does say STEAM floating in the middle, but that's actually the next level of the gymnasium. And so we have the gymnasium, we have classrooms wrapped around it on both sides. We have an opportunity for a green roof on the alt PE space that's below here. We have the double height of the library. I think I must have clicked by the library. The library is on the 3rd floor. And then we're showing green roof here. And in part, we're being very generous showing it all green because we will have to put mechanical equipment up there in part as well. But they're reasonable size that we'll have a portion that's green roof. And then the top floor, which is more sciences and more of the core academic classrooms. So this will be essentially what we'd call a 1 phase in terms of the construction of the new building. There will be a 2nd phase to do the abatement and demolition and site development. And so both initial and full occupancy are the same time. And that is September 2023. And I think I might be done. Yes. Okay. So I know it's a lot of information, but we're happy to take questions. And I'm assuming I'm not the only one that's going to take questions. So you building committee members and my principal and everyone else are here too. So are we doing microphones for people?
So if anyone has questions, I'm going to take this side, Amy's going to take that side, and then we'll try our best to answer the questions. Go ahead.
Can you just clarify what you meant by town vote? In one of the first presentation, I think you said there would be a town vote.
So in the spring of 2019, there'll be a debt exclusion question before the voters to fund the project.
But not on which design?
No. So we'll decide the design in July. The committee will take a vote. We'll submit that to the MSBA. They approve it, we hope, in August of this year. And then we go through a design phase, a schematic design phase, and that'll get the specific pricing of the project, and then we present that to the voters. And that'll be presented to the voters in the spring of 2019. There's a vote. If it's affirmative vote, we can begin the work. Is that okay? Yeah, okay, Anthony. Oh, okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I'm going. Long-term, over 30 years in this town. It's very exciting that we are investing in education and especially tagging STEAM and humanities and maker spaces and all these things that feel more forward-looking than what we've been. But I have a couple questions. Why do, almost every time you're building in the front, why do you not go down to the basement level in the front? And because you're talking about a 5-6 story building, why couldn't it be one of those stories is underground?
Because the majority of the classroom spaces are the ones that need windows. So if you put it in a basement, you're basically perpetuating the basement situation we have right now on the site, which we have a lot of square footage that's not suited for classroom space.
Right, but you couldn't move other things into there, like the cafeteria. If you look at some of these options, it does seem like you could move some other things in there. And the other question is on the last option, where you're building the land up, couldn't you do a structured parking situation so you actually not just take that whole big, beautiful space that you've just opened up and have it parking? Seems like a waste, but...
Yeah. No, structured parking is possible. It's not reimbursed by the state funding agency, but we certainly have been looking at it if we felt that it was necessary because we weren't accommodating enough parking on the site. But it is an additional cost to structure versus not. So that's... Anyone else?
Anthony, go ahead.
Are we not doing
Thank you. Is the green space in option 1 above the auditorium accessible from the front to the main green?
Can someone stand up? Who's talking to me? I'm sorry. Whoever's speaking, could you stand up? I'm sorry. I
Hi.
feel funny, like looking out into nothing.
There's a green roof above the auditorium in option 1. Is that accessible from the front of the building?
No. It was at once upon a time, but with heights and things, it's
Okay.
not.
That was a change that we had
Yep.
seen. Okay, thank you.
Well, yeah. Right. It's not directly at grade anymore. Good eye.
Since you're asking us to vote on the exclusion, the debt exclusion, why not also include us to vote on which option we would prefer as citizens? After all, we're paying for it.
Well, my short answer would be that's the effort that's being made by the building committee to do that on your behalf. I mean, they're a volunteer committee. There's almost 20 people that are volunteering their time. They're coming to every meeting every 2 weeks for hours on end, so they're fully informed, and they are speaking on your behalf in the best that they can.
Just one other point. The process doesn't allow it. So the process that we signed up for with the MSBA is one in which together the town picks an option, the state agrees to it, and then we work on the financing of it.
I have something to add to that too. So tonight, after we're done with this Q&A, we have a 2-page, very detailed form that we want you to fill out to give us the feedback on what you think of these options, what you think of the overall option or specific aspects of that option. So there are probably 30 questions on that form. So that tonight is your chance to give us that feedback. Okay. We'll just get through the questions first so everybody can have them answered.
I have a couple questions about interior elevations. Do you envision any need for ramps or differing floor levels in either of the renovation options? Or would each floor be the same level throughout the entire structure?
So in the renovation options, when we keep Fusco, we will be aligning with Fusco to keep it so we don't have ramps and different levels happening throughout the building.
That's good news. And would that then mean that Fusco House's current floor heights would then dictate the rest of the structure's floor heights?
Correct.
And are those different for the complete rebuild options? Would they have the same floor heights?
The newer ones we probably would do a little bit taller, higher floor to floor if we have our choice, which we would in new construction.
And what about, you mentioned a little bit about accessibility for arriving and departing at, wheelchair access, and how about elevators inside?
Yes, it will be fully accessible.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi. In several of the designs, you have entry at the second floor level and cafeteria and other things at the first floor level. Will the first floor have windows, cafeteria have windows,
Yes.
and other first floor, even with a second floor entry?
Yes. So the way it's sort of designed is that the cafeteria is at the outer wall to the back. And so that's why we're talking about maybe plazas and courtyards and things from the cafeteria you could go directly out.
Hi, so I just had a quick question about the accreditation issue. You mentioned that we had in this town a 2023 deadline for that, but the only project that would the only proposal that completes renovation by 2023 is the last one. Can you just talk about how that accreditation figures into these timelines?
If we're building the project in 2023, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges will be completely happy with us. If we're not, then we're in trouble.
On the first option, that first option seems to have more perimeter because you're keeping more of the existing, so it seems like there's a lot of perimeter to that building, and you're also keeping existing structures which are currently very compromised in terms of their performance, and I'm wondering, is there an energy penalty to the first option, and is it going to be more expensive in order to try and take that existing structure, causing compromises and kind of putting budget into bringing that up to code versus putting money into classrooms and labs and places like that?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I think that you're hitting upon the general concept that the more sort of exterior of the building, the more you could have potential heat loss and gain and things like that. Buildings nowadays are built pretty tight with a lot of insulation and really like 3 panes of glass on your windows and all of that, which we would be doing. I think that there's pros and cons to the renovation. You have a lot of existing material there that you don't have to recreate. But at the same time, you have to bring it all up to code and meet all those same requirements. Put that insulation in the exterior walls, replace all of those windows so they're acting and performing as well as all the other windows. All of those things will need to be done. And so we are working through, again, at a high level, getting a little more refined numbers to understand if they're, again, to your words, pros and cons of keeping them online. So that is part of the information that we're developing to give to the building committee to, as we develop it, to get more and more fine-tuned with things. Thanks.
Hi. I'm curious about the notion of programming the green space in front of the building, no matter what size it is. I've been focusing on designs 2 and 3. They look to have different amounts of green space in front of them, less than in design 1. I'm wondering if the retention of Fusco and Columns House is what causes these 2 alternatives to have different amounts of green space in front. But more importantly, I think it would be good to, in some way, survey current high school students and possibly middle school students about whether green space in front of the building has any real importance, in terms of how they feel about the school that they go to every day. It could be more of something that the community of grown-ups is more concerned about, and I just think we should try to gather a little more information about that. But if you have any comments, please make them.
I think the reprogramming would be a part of the process. Just like you program the inside of the building, you would program the outside of the building and how it's used. I certainly know from hearing from the faculty so far all the different ways that they would use the spaces. So that would be part of the design. And we do have a student group that we've been meeting with and that's been joining us for the building committee as well. And so we can definitely pose that question to them.
Will there be smooth, continuous sidewalks to all entrances? There certainly isn't now. To get there on foot, you're dodging cars. So will we improve the access by foot?
Yes.
And what will that look like? How will that be done?
Well, we have to meet, again, in terms of, it'll be all new and it will be all smooth because it needs to be to meet the requirements for accessibility. So it's just a requirement in the design. It's not optional. It just will be exactly what we have to do. One of the things that's interesting about the site, again, because we have a 20-foot drop, we will be working with, again, the different regulating agencies to determine, are we required to do extensive ramping from the front to the back, and what that might be and what that might look like. But in general, all doors will be accessible from accessible parking, accessible sidewalks, and different routes.
I'm more concerned with trying to avoid being hit by cars than ramps. So how will we make it better to walk than it is now? Because now it's really for cars.
Again, it'll be part of the site design. I think you can sort of see different potentials. So, and some of them we're thinking about whether or not cars are not at the front of the building. And so that is purely sidewalk and pedestrian. So these are things that we're working through in the design.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, a couple of questions. Number one, with the projects that are going to be with brand new buildings, is the taking down of the old buildings going to be covered in the whole cost?
Yes. In terms of, and it's covered in the cost, and it's also reimbursed by the state.
Okay. Second of all, we had a situation around the high school where residents were complaining at one particular time that they couldn't get out of their driveway because of the number of vehicles that were on Mass Avenue and the side streets, which resulted in signs being put up on Mass Avenue saying no parking Monday through Friday, I believe it's 8 to 4. Will those signs be eliminated with the new 250 parking spaces?
I don't know exactly whether you're talking about the stretch along Mass Ave and how it's signed right now. So the goal is that we're providing more spaces than you have now, and we're also going to be relocating some of the town programs out of there so that those spaces won't be used by those other entities. So the goal is to have more organized parking on the school site as possible. We're not planning on changing any of the rules in terms of students being able to drive and park on site. I realized, having worked in the town for almost 8 years now, that the parking is a challenge. And I know you may not agree with this, but I certainly appreciate the fact that the goal of this project isn't to pave the site, right? So we want to balance between accommodating what's reasonable for the number of parking spaces. And at this point, the design is looking for 250, which is 50 spaces more than what's currently there, on top of the fact that we're going to be eliminating some program spaces from the building, and therefore those parkers will not be coming to the building. So we're going to keep analyzing that. We're actually in the process of a traffic study right now. We got it in under the wire before the seniors graduated and have put out a survey to find out how people are coming and going, the timing, the schedule. We've done all of that, and so we're going to continue that analysis to find out the best way to circulate around the site and through the site and drop off and pick up. So.
And lastly, any project would have to adhere to all the guidelines of the noise abatement?
Yes, you're referring to like from equipment noises and things like that?
Hours of operation, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm glad to see that there's some eco-green roofs pretty much in all the options, which is great. Is it safe to assume that other than mechanical equipment, that for the most part all other roof surfaces could be solar panel? And do you have a sense yet, have you done any analysis as to what proportion of the school's energy needs could be derived from the solar panels? Thanks.
Thank you. And as mentioned, we do have a sustainability subcommittee that we're meeting with as part of the building committee, which is great. Yes, we actually understand that your solar panels that are on the roof now, when they were put on, there was an agreement made that they can be relocated and reused in the new design, so that's good. Until we actually design the system, have all the mechanical units, have them laid out, determine how much space we can get for PV on the roof. All of those steps, as Jeff alluded to, we've got about almost 2 years more of design, so all of that we'll be learning all of that information and be able to share with you the energy efficiencies we can gain and how much we will be generating. So, thank you.
Hi, I was wondering, do any of the designs have less or greater risk of cost overruns or delays?
No, no such thing. Actually, I'm joking, but we're actually very, very good at keeping costs down, so I'm not worried at all. But I think that maybe the only thing I would put out there is when you do have portions that are renovation, those have a level of unknown. We learn as much as we possibly can, but there's always a little bit more risk with some level of renovation. But again, I'm happy to give you our counts. We're pretty low on change orders, so we're okay.
You mentioned that all of these plans are designed to be able to be expanded in the future. You're trying to think for the 100-year plan. With the regrading in the back of plan number 4, because it's a very large building in the front of the plan. Like where would you even expand on that site after you did all that landscaping in the back to accommodate that?
Okay, we're just concerned that maybe everyone didn't hear. So the question was about how you would expand any of the school buildings, which we have been designing and thinking about. Unfortunately, I know all of you know what happened with Thompson, and so that was exactly where we thought it needed to expand to, and that's exactly where we expanded. So it can happen. The population is growing. So in particular, the question was related to the fourth alternative and how you would expand. So we've just taken some first passes at this and actually haven't even shared it with the building committee yet. But I think that generally we would have to use that parking to the back and then create more parking elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? So we'd have to extend out the back. We know we can't go forward. It's the street. We can't go to the left and we can't go to the right. So the only place to expand is to the rear. Yeah. Well, yeah. He doesn't want to go further up.
Does each of these 4 options provide enough of the backstage space for theater, shop, fly space, wing space for the performing arts program to get involved in the regional and state level competitions that it cannot at this time?
Yes. You will have a true fly loft, and the goal we're actually programming spaces called green rooms, but in addition to that, we're also placing the larger spaces like the band and chorus there as well. So that helps with a lot of things. I know what happens now where kids basically, the instruments are on one floor and the stage is on the other floor. There's a lot of schlepping of equipment back and forth. So the idea that there's a whole sort of suite of spaces. But yeah, the fly loft will be probably just a hair under 50 feet, which is pretty tall. You'll have all of the rigging, all the lights, all the things that basically, and it's maybe for people who are lay people think I'm making this up and it sounds flamboyant. This is actually what all high schools have. So you're just going to be brought up to where all the other newer high schools are. So.
Hi, could you please comment a little more on what you're going to do with the existing high school students during the construction? I can't tell in options 2 and 3 if modular classrooms are needed, and in option 1 it seems like a fairly extreme relocation is required.
So we're still in process and looking at that. So the alternatives that the phasing that we've been showing is incremental. So at any one given time, there's only a smaller portion that needs to be relocated as needed. And in all instances, we're building a lot of classrooms right in that first phase. And that starts to be your swing space. As soon as we do that, we can relocate a portion of the students over. So there's a number of things that we're looking at as well on the site, with possible modulars for some particular program, not necessarily the core academics of the classrooms for the high schoolers, but to take, again, free up room and put an entire program there so that they're out of the way for the period of time. Talking about relocating the preschool out entirely and so on. So it's very incremental right now as we determine it, but I know Jeff says this every time the question happens. There will be teaching and learning going on, and it will be safe and secure because there's no other way to do it.
So just to follow on that question about the modulars, I've heard that in different plans there's talk about relocating some of the students off-site because there's just not enough room for them if you are doing these phased constructions. So will all the high school students actually be able to be on site, or will they have to be put somewhere else in town or even out of town? Which I've heard.
So I'm just going to say it. There's a lot of talk about trying to use Minuteman, their existing building. So We don't have any definitive movement on that. You know, it would take its own analysis, and there's just a lot of open-ended as far as that, and so I'm sure that's what you've heard. In truth, Minuteman would be large enough to take your entire high school, so they would all go there, and the construction site would be free of students entirely. But again, that's not anything that's happening right now. The powers that be, people standing next to me and so on, are you know, knocking on doors and asking the question and seeing if it's possible. Otherwise, we haven't identified, unless you know of some empty building that we haven't heard about, you can tell us, any really significant square footage available in town. So hence, that's why we have to do the phasing of it. If the more opportunity we have to empty out the building, the faster we can build the building. That makes sense.
Hi, I'm concerned about the green space in front and the option 4 that just completely eliminates it. I just think is a horrible option to have this monolithic building across Mass Ave. But can you, thank you. But can you speak a little bit more about the green space? And are you already planning to just eliminate the trees to have staging areas or modular classrooms or something like that? That's disturbing to me that that's all going to get wiped out in some form is what it sounds like. And I use that area. I walk through there. It's sort of a community green space. It's not just about what the kids think it should be used for. And it's kind of a neighborhood. There are houses and apartments right along that area. So I would like to hear more about that.
Thank you, and I agree wholeheartedly. It also is actually a memorial area as well. So all of that's very important to us. We've done already an initial survey of the trees. Again, just at a first blush to figure out ones that are in good shape, ones that aren't in good shape, and so on. I cannot tell a lie. If we construct on the front of the site, a lot of them will go, but it does not mean that we will not be replacing, and it does not mean that we will not be programming the area for uses like what you're talking about, walking, benches for seating, and certainly reincorporating these very important memorials. So some of the memorials are in stone, and some are actually the trees themselves. So all of that, as time goes on, we will be talking to all the people involved to make sure that we're accommodating that. And also talking directly with neighbors. I mean, I think abutters are just as important as everybody, but the people that are right there, we want to hear from and how you use the space. Thank you.
Hi. I have a question about, I have two questions. So one is about the cost and whether having a longer timeline is better for the town in terms of financing that.
I don't have the financing answer. Who's got the financing answer? Anyone? Do you want to go for it?
Adam, you want to talk about that? I'm putting you on the spot. You want to grab a mic or just?
So having a longer or shorter timeline, is that?
Yeah, okay. Adam Chapdelaine, Town Manager. Precinct 4.
So I think it's a two-part answer. So the longer the construction goes, the more expensive the project will be because of cost escalation, because of inflation. I suppose there would be some incremental borrowing savings if we spaced out how we were borrowing the money. If we didn't have to borrow it, we wouldn't be making those payments, so that there would be more of a flattening of what the impact on the tax rate would be. But I think the cost escalation for a longer period of time would dramatically outpace any savings we would have by not borrowing as much over that course of time.
And then my second question, or my comment to you is, I've been working on sustainability and architecture for about 19 years. And so I greatly appreciate your effort to look at the existing buildings. Even if you improve them and improve their energy efficiency, the embodied energy that's in all of those materials can't be paid back for like 30 to 80 years, depending on the amount of construction that's done. So saving them is significant to the carbon footprint of the town and the community and everything else. Thank you. And so I'm curious if option 3, if it's possible to do, is save fescue, or Fusco, sorry, and move some of the, programming up front a little further, sort of compromise between a couple of the other options. That's all.
Thank you. I'm not sure I understand your question. So doesn't 3 become 2 then?
I guess, well, sort of in a more, without using the middle building, I guess, because you're moving more programming from the back, from the rear up front. So it's a combination. But I guess my point is, it's not really a question. It's just,
okay.
It seems like there's the possibilities for using more of existing building than wiping it completely out.
Okay, thank you.
Oops, sorry. I just had a quick comment, which is if we're talking about a building that would be used for 50 or 100 years, we should be really thinking about the green space also in our town, which is not very much when you look around at neighboring towns. And I think being very mindful of saving some of that front green space. Most of these designs are building up in front to save all this space in the back, but that's not as accessible to the community. And I do think, especially looking 30, let alone 50 years ahead, we need to be thinking about green space in our town.
Thank you.
Question concerning the schemes. There are 4 schemes that are presented. Sorry? There are 4 schemes that are being presented. From those 4 schemes, are all of those being engaged in thoughtfulness about LEED accreditation? LEED is Leadership in Energy Environmental Design. And if so, can you just discuss some of the reaches that you'd like to see go into the high school rebuilding, whether it's full construction or renovation?
Yes, so the question was about how sustainably will the building be designed, and how, energy efficient will it be as you're operating it year after year for the next 50, 75 or more years, and all of those questions. And so there's different rating systems that you can design to, and one is LEED, which was referenced. There's another one that's called Mass Chips, which is how we designed the Thompson School. And we, in fact, as was mentioned, we have a sustainability subcommittee, and our first meeting is tomorrow. So I will have more information of what the goals of that subcommittee will be, but there certainly is going to be talk and exploration of photovoltaics and geothermal and so on. I've even heard mention of digesters. So if you don't know what a digester is, you might be finding out. So there really is a goal to have the building be as close to what's referred to as net zero, which is something we would love to see happen. And we design all of our buildings to be as sustainable and as green as possible. And it's a little bit of looking between upfront costs against long-term costs and those comparisons. So all of that analysis will be part of the design process as we go forward. Thanks.
A question about green roofs. All the plans seem to have green roofs. I love them in office buildings and residential buildings where they're well used. If they're there for energy efficiency, then I don't know what the comparison is versus using the same space for solar panels. If they're there for people to use as gardens, things like that. I guess most of the courtyards I see in schools turn into unmaintained dead zone spaces. I wouldn't want to see that happen. So if you could comment on the use of the green roofs, and are there examples in other schools where they work out well?
Yeah. So I think there's been a lot of talk amongst specifically all of the science department and all the things that they would like to be doing on a roof. So it's programming that in comparison. PVs are very important as well. So it's going to be designing the spaces so that they're used very well. One of the other things you're talking about is sometimes you just do green roofs just to hold some of the water and the water runoff. So that's a very functional reason for it. But different types of green roofing can be, again, very welcoming. There's a possibility for student gardens. I mean, a lot of these things are just there's a lot of possibilities out there, and we're going to work through them both with the students and the faculty and the building committee. So it'll be a combination. I know I just showed a green line, but you know, it'll be more than just green. So.
One question: will there be air conditioning?
Yes.
Great.
Can I ask one question?
Hi, I have a question and a comment. I have a question and a comment. In the first three schemes, can a pedestrian walk all the way around the building, specifically the CVS side, which has been a frustrating endeavor? So that's the first thing. And then the comment is, in general, it would have been great if Arlington had land banked perhaps the CVS property or the Brigham property, so that we wouldn't have the growing pains we have now. We could use it for swing space or parking or field space or staging. It would have made this whole process so much better.
So the first part of the question was related to sidewalks and the connection at the, again, if you're on Mass Ave looking at the building, the right-hand side. So currently you can drive, and if you're careful, very careful, you can walk around the left-hand side, and it's still relatively steep. Again, there's about 24 feet between the front of the building and the back of the building. So it has come up, and thank you for bringing it up here. The building committee has mentioned it, and we'll look into ways to make pedestrian access on the right-hand side. Because you know, if you've ever been caught and you need to get over there, you're going all the way around the building. And what that might look like. Again, if we make the path, it needs to be an accessible path. And so how we create that, short of giving somebody a rappelling rope to go down the retaining wall, which we won't do that. Although I'm sure some of the high schoolers wouldn't mind. So yes, thank you. It's a good question. And the other items you talked about is before my time. So I can't respond to any of that. Anyone else?
I would just say to that point, you know, we often say at the building committee meetings that it would be nice if we had the Brigham, if we had the CVS, but there were decisions made years ago that we have inherited, and we're doing the best we can with the restrictions we have.
I think we have time for maybe 3 or 4 more questions.
I have a question about the court. I love the idea of the courtyards, but have you done any sun studies? Because I see some of these are like 6-story tall courtyards, which could become these sort of death outdoor zones that don't get used and are always in shade, or you know, with winter sun, never get sun at all.
Yeah. Thank you, and very good point. No, we haven't gotten into the sun study stage, but I think knowing it's 6 stories is pretty understandable what the shadow lines will be like even without doing it. So again, it'll be part of the programming it, how it's laid out, what's there, how people will use it. All of that will be part of the design phases. Thank you.
Oh, hi, sorry. Currently, right now, because I don't have a high school student, can they go outside for lunch? Do they go outside for lunch? Do they hang out outside at all?
Yeah, they do have courtyards, and they do use them, and they're very popular.
And the other question I had is about the gym in the back. You said it was going to be bigger, but there are currently 2 gyms in the high school. So are you getting rid of one gym and doubling this?
No, so the largest gym, called the Red Gym, or the Taz gym, is 12,000, and we'll be providing one larger gym that's 16. We also have what the state calls alternative PE spaces, alt PE spaces, and so we'll have 2 of those. One will be relatively comparable to the blue gym, and the other will accommodate the fitness center that you have.
Hi, I had a question about the options 2 and 3. You mentioned on option 4 about the approachability to the building. Do you know the square footage of the green space currently in front of the high school?
Well, we'll acreage. I would probably put it at least 5 acres.
And
4 to 5 acres.
Okay.
I don't know definitively. Don't somebody quote me. If anyone knows the answer definitively, let me know.
The question
we'll find out.
So looking at options 2 and options 3, I know option 4, it's right up on Mass Ave. On option 3, those 2 front wings, do you have approximately how much of that green space those 2 wings would take?
I mean, it was something less than half, certainly. It's less than half.
And on option 2, it seems the wings seem a little bit also closer to Mass Ave. Do you know what the distance is between Mass Ave and those wings?
I don't have the exact, I used to, but we keep shifting things a little bit. So I would probably guess at least 50 feet. It could be more on those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the question I have is, I noticed that the option 4, which doesn't sound like it's going to go, given what I'm hearing here, but it shows, the other options all show a partial occupancy or initial occupancy, is what you call it, on 122 or something like that, 122, 222. And then all of a sudden, the last option, they don't do any occupancy until like 18 months later. And it strikes me as a little strange. So what's going on? What are the horrible effects between the initial occupancy and the later occupancy? What are the inconveniences that are being eliminated so that when they finally occupy on that last scheme, they don't have to deal with any of the other stuff? Because you're obviously not, you're obviously postponing initial occupancy for 18 months for a reason, I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah. So, right, so the idea is that you're building it all, so it's a little bit, try to think about it as like this is the contractor's side and this is the school side. So it's keeping it separate as long as possible in that case. It's something, I mean, we didn't really analyze, to your point is, you know, would you ever build half of the building up front and let them occupy it sooner? So, yeah, it's possible. Thank you.
Is there time for just one more? Okay, last question. So thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. Just at a project level as the architect, could you just give like a couple of bullet points of comparative drawbacks for each design? Like the thing that, I mean, if there was a total front runner, we'd probably have one design. Like what are the, you know, like this one will take longer or this one just...
I might be able to answer that a little bit. So we're passing the surveys out right now. So on these forms, it's two-sided, and we try to give kind of the different aspects of each option. Some might call a pro, others might call a con. So it's more of an aspect that's kind of included in there. So one of them is long. Option 1 is longer. Option 4 is shorter. That's on that form there. So that might help you there.
So first I want to thank Lori and the team from HMFH. And also, I didn't introduce Jim Burrows, who is here from Skanska, our owner's project manager, and Chuck just ran out the door, but anyway, Jim has young children. So he was here tonight. He put a lot of effort into this. So at this time, we'd like you to take as much time as you need to complete the feedback form. You can walk around the building, you can walk around the room, you can ask questions, and then people are turning them in where, Amy? The back of the room before you leave. There's places where you can drop them off, so drop them off. And our next meeting of the building committee is Tuesday, June 19th at 6 p.m. in the high school, the school committee room. You're welcome to come to that meeting. There's public participation beforehand, and we invite the public to come and give us feedback at that time. There's also a meeting on June 26th, and then there's a meeting on June 28th, and we're hoping by June 28th to decide on which of the designs we'll be presenting to the state. Any other, okay. All right, thanks so much. If you can fill out the feedback forms, we'd be grateful. And we'll be walking around to take any questions.